Hi everyone, today I'm going to be sharing with you how I get flawless base makeup every single time without fail. No separation, no cakiness, no settling in fine lines, wrinkles or pores. Just smooth, airbrushed foundation that looks like skin on my over 40 skin. And newsflash, this also works on my mum who is over 70. So let's get straight on with it. If you are new here, hi, my name's Gemma. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you haven't subscribed to my channel for any reason in the past, I'd love it if you'd think about doing it in this video today. Also, click on that like button and the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos like these. So first things first, I like to prep my skin within an inch of its life. If I haven't exfoliated for a few days, I like to exfoliate my skin. I don't do this every single day. It's not necessary. Over exfoliation will just lead to a lot of problems down the line anyway. So if you haven't exfoliated for a few days, definitely do that either with an acid toner or with a physical exfoliator before you sit down and apply your skincare. Skincare is a definite must. I absolutely love a hydrating mist, and I also love a good moisturizer before I do my makeup. Allow that to sink into the skin for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and then remove any of the excess oils from the surface of the skin. You don't really want any tackiness on the surface of the skin because this may hinder the foundation that you're about to apply to the skin. Remember, a lot of foundations are water-based, not oil-based, so if you are using a lot of skincare with oils in them, they may break that foundation down. So you want to remove any excess that hasn't sank into the skin after 5 to 10 minutes. After you've removed the excess, SPF is a must, so apply your SPF and once again, wait at least 5 minutes before you apply your makeup. Since I've hit 40 and my skin has thrown a few challenges in my way, I'm a huge believer in primers. Not everybody requires a primer though, so definitely don't waste your money if you have really smooth, beautiful, plump skin to begin with. If you have, by the way. I'm not bitter. Anyway, if you do have some texture, some open pores, if you have fine lines and wrinkles that you would like to smooth before you start applying your makeup, then a primer is a great way of doing that. I like to start in the areas that I find quite challenging, in between the brows, around the corners of the nose, anywhere that I have any dryness that any foundation that I'm going to apply to my skin later may sit into. I like to make sure that all those areas are covered and then smooth the primer around the rest of the face, making sure there is an even coverage everywhere. You don't need to use the same primer all over your face. That is a complete myth. You can use separate primers for different areas. So if you do have an oilier T-zone, you can use a lighter primer there and then use a heavier primer over your drier areas. I absolutely swear by the YSL primer. I just think it is amazing and I use this all over my face. Then I move on to color correction and covering over any imperfections that I have on my skin. Now, my facial skin doesn't necessarily need a lot of color correction. My under eye skin definitely does. I do have some dark circles and I like to use a pinky peachy color corrector under there to cancel out the pigmentation underneath my eyes. But I don't have a lot of redness on my skin at the moment. If you do, a green color corrector will correct and neutralize that pigmentation and make it a lot easier for you to apply a foundation over the top without having to pile on the foundation to cover over that pigmentation, because that pigmentation will already be gone. So I like to apply a color corrector underneath my eyes, and then I use the NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer just over a few acne scars that I have on my cheek area. I let that sit. I don't blend that in. I just let it sit on the skin and start to dry down. It won't dry down fully. It will then blend into whatever foundation I choose to apply over the top, just to give a little bit more coverage over those areas. Again, without me having to apply more foundation than is actually necessary. Then you need to pick your foundation, and this is so important, and I think a lot of people overlook this stage. They just go for the foundation that is in at the moment that has really good reviews, and they don't actually sit down, look at their skin and assess what they need in a foundation. If you require a full coverage foundation, don't go for one with a light to medium coverage and try and build it up. The more product that you have to apply to the skin, so the more you build up a foundation, the heavier it's going to look on the skin, the less it's going to look like skin, and you want your skin to look like skin. So if you need full coverage, go for a full coverage foundation. That way you're going to be applying a lot less to the skin, and your skin is going to look like skin at the end of the day, rather than just a whole bunch of foundation sitting on the surface. It's also really important to pick the right finish of a foundation. If you do have a lot of texture, a lot of open pores, and you're wanting to really smooth and blur the appearance of those pores and that texture, going for something with more of a dewy finish may be a problem for you, because anything with a dewy finish is going to emphasize that texture and those open pores a little bit more than, say, something like a natural matte foundation would do. You don't need to go for a flat matte foundation if you have imperfections on your skin. Something with a natural matte, a natural luminous matte finish will look more like your normal skin rather than something that is super shiny or super reflective or really radiant. The foundation that I'm going to be using today is the Clé de Peau Radiant Fluid Foundation Matte, which is really smoothing and blurring in its own right. It's got a great texture, it's a beautiful foundation, but it's astronomically expensive, so I don't expect everybody to have this within their makeup collection. There are some beautiful foundations on the market, however. Stay tuned, I will be doing a best foundations for over 40 video very soon. I like to split my face into 5 different sections. Section 1 is my nose and the surrounding skin around my nose all the way down to the top of my lips. Section 2 is my forehead, section 3 is my chin, and section 4 and 5 are the remaining cheek areas. I find this a lot easier to cope with. If you move in sections, your foundation isn't going to dry down too quickly, you're not going to get patchy foundation, and you can also blend in an outward motion and make sure you don't get any cakiness around the edges, making your foundation look like a mask. I always start off in the center of each section and blend outwards. Starting off with section 1, which is the nose, I use a really small brush because the nose is a much smaller area than the rest of the face. So I'm using the Refa 35 brush, again starting in the middle of the nose and blending outwards. I apply hardly any foundation whatsoever to this area, and as soon as my brush is pretty much dry, I'll move to in between my brows, which is one of my problem areas, tends to go cakey a lot throughout the day, so I hardly need any foundation whatsoever in this area, and I move into the corners of my nose, which can also hold a lot of product, so you don't need very much product there at all. Then I just blur above my lips, don't need a lot of product there either. You will be so shocked how little foundation you need for the coverage that is required. Moving on to the other sections of my skin, again, always starting in the center, dot the foundation right in the center and blur outwards. As soon as you've hardly got any more foundation on your brush whatsoever, blur into the hairline and the edges of the face. Once you get to the cheek area, you can blur that down the neck to create a seamless finish. The less foundation you apply to each section, the better it's going to look. You can always build it up after that foundation has dried down, but if you apply a lot of foundation in one go, the surface of the foundation is going to dry, but the underneath of the foundation is still going to be damp and movable, and that's where you're going to get a lot of movement, a lot of settling in fine lines and wrinkles, and a lot of cakiness as the day wears on. Apply very, very little and you won't have those problems. I don't apply any foundation underneath my eyes. I save this area for concealer, which tends to be formulated for really delicate areas like the under eyes, whereas foundation isn't really formulated for under there, and the less product that you have underneath the eyes, the less chance that you're going to get creasing throughout the day. So I just prefer not to apply foundation under that area at all. I do apply it to my eyelids though, but when I say I apply the most minute amount and blend out to the eyebrows. When I finish a full layer of foundation, I'll assess my skin and see if I need any extra coverage anywhere on my face. I do have a little bit of acne scarring still poking through, so I'm going to take the tiniest bit of foundation on my brush and just pad that from the center, once again blending out to the edges. Once I've got the coverage that I need, I want to perfect the finish of the foundation. I want it to look as skin-like as physically possible. I want to look natural. I don't want people complimenting me on my foundation. I want them complimenting me on my skin. So I take a damp blending sponge, and the one that I'm using is the Real Techniques sponge. If you don't have a sponge to hand, you can use your fingertips. I often use both steps, so damp blending sponge and then my fingertips, to really push the foundation into the skin, to melt the foundation into the skin. So rather than the foundation sitting on the surface, you're just melting it into the skin and making it look more like skin. Honestly, this step makes the world of difference. I know I'm going to get so many people saying, if you're going to use a damp blending sponge, why not just apply the foundation with a damp blending sponge? You'll get the same result. Well, I never have had the same result with that, and the reason I don't feel like I do get the same result is with a sponge I tend to apply more product. I feel like you can be a little bit more precise with the amount of foundation that you're adding to the skin when you use a brush. So I just think it looks way more skin-like doing it this way, but obviously if it works for you using a sponge, use a sponge. If you are going to use a sponge to apply your foundation, I would recommend that you use a clean damp sponge to pound the foundation into the skin. Otherwise, you're just going to be applying more product on top of product rather than doing the job of pushing the foundation into the skin and really blending everything off. Then I apply my concealer. You should apply whatever concealer suits your under eyes best. The one that suits mine is the Lancome All Over Concealer. I just absolutely love it, regardless of how many concealers I've tried since trying that particular concealer. I always go back to that one. It just really sits nicely underneath my under eyes, and it's got decent coverage. I like to apply my concealer using my fingertips. I always leave some sitting on the surface of the skin, wait a good couple of minutes, and then blend that out. I just feel like this adds to the coverage without applying more product to the skin. Then comes powder, and I know a lot of people don't like applying powder to their skin, especially if they have fine lines and wrinkles. They might feel that the powder draws moisture from the skin, making their fine lines and wrinkles more noticeable and making their skin look a little crepey, especially under the eye area. If you apply powder in the tiniest quantity in the correct way, that shouldn't happen. There's also another step that we're going to do after powder that should soften everything off and really plump up the skin again. The powder that I'm using is the Givenchy Prism Libra powder. You don't need an expensive powder, however, you can use any sort of powder. The more finely milled, the better in my experience. I take the Trigwell Cosmetics large powder puff. I love the large one. I've only just recently got it. I had the mini one before, which works lovely, but the big one is just divine. So I take quite a bit of powder on the powder puff, and then I really massage it in and make sure that it's inside the powder puff, not just on the outside of the powder puff. Knock off any excess and then really press this into the skin quite hard. You don't want to hurt your skin, you don't want to add too much pressure, but you are pressing this physically into the skin. You can do the same underneath the eyes. I think it looks superb. It sets everything in place. You don't get too much on the skin. It mattifies where you want to mattify. It smooths and it blurs, and it adds a lot of longevity to your makeup. Then comes setting spray, and many people think that setting spray should be done at the very end of a full face of makeup, not at this stage. Well, you can apply it twice, or you can apply it and wait until the end of a full face of makeup if you want to, but I like to do it at this stage when my base makeup has been completed. That way, as you're applying the rest of your products, nothing is going to shift. So you're not going to get any lift, you're not going to get any smudging, it's going to stay intact. And that's exactly what I want. I don't want my makeup moving. Adding a setting spray at this stage will also get rid of any powdery residue that is on the surface of the skin. If you've applied with a powder puff very sparingly, you shouldn't have any powdery residue. But if you do, if you've slightly over applied, a setting spray can completely correct that. And that's it. That's how I create a bulletproof, airbrushed, smoothed, flawless base that lasts all day and looks like skin. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful in some way. If you have, please don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already. I've popped another couple of videos over here that I think you might enjoy. Hope to see you all in the next one. Bye everyone.